So staining the black, as I mentioned in a previous video, is the easiest way to see your carved marks. I've stained both of these pieces of wood a little bit with two different materials, but I'll show you how to do this. It's really, really simple. So the red that I have on both the MDF and the birch is actually Relief Ink. Now, the Relief Ink we use is Caligo Relief Ink. It's a hybrid kind of ink, meaning that it cleans up with solvent or oil-based thinners, but it also cleans up with soap and water. So what I did was put a little solvent mixed in with it and use that on the block. Of course, you're going to have the fumes of the solvent on the block. So I also used just simple glass cleaner. Sprayed a little glass cleaner in the ink to thin it out. And I'm just using a rag here. And then just wipe it onto the surface. You can do this same thing with acrylic paint. If it's acrylic paint in a tube, you may want to thin it a little bit with either water or glass cleaner, or perhaps isopropyl alcohol, or the very inexpensive bottles of acrylic paint that you can get at hobby stores like Michael's and Hobby Lobby and so on. They have very little pigment in them. They're more liquidy and runny. Those work really well. They're inexpensive. You can just squeeze it out and then just rub it off onto the surface. The other thing that I used here was ink. So this is a black acrylic ink, and I applied the black ink with just a brush. And this is ink at full concentration. I'll put a little bit more over here. Okay. But even it can be thinned out. I thinned it out a little bit with water. With wood and water, we want to be careful. I don't want to use too much water because it can raise the grain and start to make the wood surface change and be a little less strong as it was. So here's thinned down black ink. You can see it's much thinner. Right. And you could use a big brush. You could use one of those foam brushes. Doesn't really matter. You could even use a rag if you wanted to use a rag. I'm going to then kind of wipe off as much of that ink as I can. Some of it's soaking in. That's just to help it dry really quickly. At full potency, there's a lot of pigment in there. I don't need a ton of pigment. I just need to change the color of the surface somewhat so I can see my cuts show up. So really, really simple process. All you're doing is staining that surface.